Good morning. You're listening to The Brief Wake Up, your mindful start to the day. I am Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. We took some time off this week, but are back to pick up where we left off. For health this morning, let's discuss peptides, what they really do, and what the hype misses. Peptides are everywhere right now, in wellness clinics, podcasts, and magazine stories promising fat loss, better skin, more energy, and even longer life. But here's the part most people don't realize. Peptides isn't one thing. It's a catch-all word for a lot of very different compounds that do very different things. Some are natural signals your body already makes. Some are lab-made. Some behave more like real drugs. Others are still closer to research experiments. When they all get grouped together, it makes everything sound more proven and more powerful than it really is. Some peptides make good biological sense. A good example is GHKCU, a copper peptide involved in wound healing and tissue repair. It helps signal collagen production and skin repair. That's why it shows up in skin, hair, and post-procedure treatments. This is real repair biology, but most of the solid human evidence is about skin and local healing, not whole body regeneration. Other peptides are mostly about calming inflammation, not rebuilding tissue. KPV is one of those. It's used for things like gut inflammation and certain skin conditions. The biology lines up. It helps quiet inflammatory signals. But large human studies are still limited. It's better thought of as inflammation support, not a fat loss or muscle building solution. Then there are things that get marketed as peptides even though they're not peptides at all. NAD+ is a good example. It's a molecule found in every cell that helps your mitochondria make energy and helps with DNA repair. Levels go down with age and illness, which is why boosting NAD+ is marketed for energy and longevity. Some people do feel better, but the idea that NAD+ is a proven anti-aging treatment is still ahead of the human data. The newest wave goes even further into experimental territory. Compounds like 5-amino-1-MQ are designed to tweak metabolic enzymes linked to fat storage and energy use. In animals, this looks promising. In humans, we still don't have strong long-term safety or outcome data. This is cutting-edge metabolism science, but it's not yet established medicine. You'll also hear about injectable blends like Lipo-C. These aren't peptides. They're mixes of B vitamins and fat transport nutrients. They can support energy and help people who are deficient, but they're supportive tools, not major drivers of fat loss or longevity. And then there's tirzepatide, which often gets lumped into the peptide conversation. It's a powerful metabolic drug that affects appetite and insulin. It works, but that's drug therapy, not regenerative or repair biology. So what's the real takeaway? Some peptide therapies tap into real biology and can help with things like repair and inflammation. Others are promising but still experimental. And a lot of what's being sold right now is based more on early science and big promises than on solid long-term human data. New doesn't always mean proven. A good mechanism doesn't always mean real-world results. And trendy definitely doesn't always mean safe. Peptides may be part of the future of medicine, but right now they live in a gray zone, where real biology and real hype overlap. The news is next. In the news, a major escalation in U.S.-Cuba policy is unfolding, and it's already reshaping energy flows in the Americas. President Trump has signed a new executive order threatening tariffs on any country that sells or supplies oil to Cuba. The move is designed to choke off Havana's remaining fuel lifelines, and it's already putting direct pressure on Mexico. Here's what just happened. The executive order declares Cuba a national security emergency and authorizes the U.S. to impose tariffs on imports from countries that provide oil to the island, even indirectly. The administration hasn't announced specific tariff rates yet, but the mechanism is now in place. The strategic target is clear. Since the U.S. cut off Venezuelan oil to Cuba following the Maduro operation, Mexico has become one of Cuba's most important remaining suppliers. Mexico has been shipping thousands of barrels per day, helping keep Cuba's power plants, transportation system, and basic infrastructure running. This week, Mexico paused at least some of those shipments. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum confirmed a temporary halt by Pemex, Mexico's state oil company. She's publicly framing it as a sovereign, contractual decision, not a response to U.S. pressure, but the timing is unmistakable. In other words, tariff threat issued. Oil shipments pause equals message received. Why does this matter? Cuba is already facing a severe energy crisis. With Venezuelan oil gone and Mexican shipments reduced, Cuba is reportedly down to just weeks of fuel reserves. The result is long gasoline lines, rolling blackouts, and deeper economic strain on an already fragile system. From Washington's perspective, this is economic pressure as foreign policy. The Trump administration is using tariffs not just as trade tools, but as geopolitical leverage, forcing developing and third world countries to choose between access to U.S. markets and continued business with Cuba. For Mexico, it's a particularly uncomfortable position. Mexico depends heavily on U.S. trade. Cuba is a regional ally and humanitarian concern. Now Mexico is caught in the middle, under threat of economic punishment if it keeps Cuba fueled. The bigger picture. This marks a shift from bilateral sanctions to secondary pressure. The U.S. isn't just sanctioning Cuba, it's pressuring Cuba's partners. That raises broader implications. It tests U.S.-Mexico relations. It signals a tougher regional posture after Venezuela, and it shows tariffs being used as a blunt geopolitical weapon. Bottom line, Cuba's oil lifeline is tightening fast. Mexico is already pulling back, and the U.S. is making it clear. Doing business with Cuba now comes with a price. This isn't just about Cuba. It's about how trade, energy, and foreign policy are being fused into a single pressure strategy across the region. The Big Sip is next. Our Big Sip continues with our Living with Absence Grief series. Today we discuss the myth of closure. We use the word closure like it's something you complete. You get closure, you finish grieving, you move on. Psychologically, that's not how grief works. Most people don't let go of the person they lost. They change the relationship. Externally, the relationship ends. Internally, it often continues. People still talk to the person in their head. They still wonder what they would think. They still feel their influence in choices, values, and daily moments. That's not a failure to grieve. That's how a bonded brain adapts to permanent separation. Modern grief psychology has a name for this: continuing bonds. For a long time, grief theory taught that healthy grieving meant detaching from the deceased, withdrawing emotional energy and reinvesting it elsewhere. But research and lived experience showed something different. Most people don't sever the bond, they transform it. The relationship doesn't disappear, it becomes internal. The voice that used to exist in the room becomes a voice in your mind. The presence that used to be physical becomes a presence carried inside you. This is why acceptance is so misunderstood. Acceptance doesn't mean you stop missing them. It doesn't mean it stops hurting. It doesn't mean you're okay with what happened. Acceptance means something more subtle and more difficult. It means your brain stops expecting reunion in the external world and starts carrying the relationship internally instead. That shift is not a moment. It's a long neurological and emotional process. Your attachment system must learn a new rule. They are no longer someone I will see again out there. They are someone I carry with me in here. That transition can feel strange. People sometimes worry that talking to the person in their head means they're stuck. They worry that feeling their presence means they're not healing. But in most cases, it's the opposite. It's the brain's way of preserving love without continuing to expect physical return. When people say, "You need closure," what they often mean is, "Your grief is uncomfortable for me." Because grief without closure doesn't have a neat ending. It doesn't wrap itself up. It doesn't disappear on a schedule. Psychologically healthy grief doesn't look like closure. It looks like integration. The person becomes part of your inner life, part of how you think, part of how you love, part of how you make sense of the world. They become part of your identity, not in a way that traps you in the past, but in a way that shapes who you are going forward. You don't close grief. You absorb it. You don't finish loving someone. You learn how to love them in a world where they are no longer physically present. That's not weakness. That's not being stuck. That's what a bonded human brain does when love has nowhere else to go. It finds a new place to live. Next time we talk about living two realities when we lose someone, the lighter roast is next. There was a time when sending a message meant something very simple. You sent it. And then you waited. You didn't know when it was seen. You didn't know if it was ignored. You didn't know if the person was busy, asleep, driving, or just pretending to be busy. There was plausible deniability. Read receipts ended that. Now, instead of just sending a message, you are entering a small psychological contract. Because once someone can see that you've read their message, a new question appears. If you saw it, why haven't you answered? Read receipts quietly turn texting from communication into surveillance. Not in a dramatic way, in a very modern, low-grade, emotionally complicated way. For the sender, read receipts offer something that feels like control. You get confirmation, you get certainty, you get proof that your message landed. It reduces one kind of anxiety. Did they even see it? But it introduces a new one. They saw it. So now what does their silence mean? Silence used to be ambiguous. Now it feels interpretive. For the recipient, read receipts do something else. They convert a casual message into a time-bound obligation. The moment you open it, the clock starts. You're no longer just someone who received the message. You're someone who is now actively choosing not to respond. Even if you're in a meeting, even if you're with your kids, even if you just don't have the emotional bandwidth. The app doesn't care. It just quietly tells the other person, they saw you. Read receipts turn attention into a social currency. They create a subtle hierarchy. Fast reply equals you matter. Slow reply equals something is wrong. No reply equals you are now in a psychological trial you didn't consent to. What's funny is that read receipts were sold as a feature for clarity. But what they mostly created is pressure. Pressure to perform availability. Pressure to manage other people's expectations. Pressure to respond before you're actually ready. They also changed the emotional meaning of being busy. Being busy used to be a valid reason. Now, if you've read it, being busy feels like an excuse. And here's the irony. Most of us don't want to monitor each other. We just want to feel acknowledged. We want to know we're not shouting into the void. But read receipts turned acknowledgement into a visible metric. And once something is measurable, it becomes emotionally charged. So what's the benefit? For senders, it reduces uncertainty but increases interpretation. For recipients, it increases transparency but reduces emotional breathing room. It solves one problem and quietly creates three more, which is basically modern technology in a sentence. So the real question isn't, should you turn read receipts on or off? It's this: do you want your phone to track communication, or do you want it to track obligation? Because once someone can see that you've read something, you're no longer just communicating, you're managing expectations. And that might be the heaviest thing your phone asks you to carry all day. Our commemoration is next. On this day in 1948, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in New Delhi. Gandhi didn't just lead India's independence movement, he permanently changed the global understanding of power. He showed that organized, disciplined nonviolence could destabilize an empire. His death forced the world to confront a hard truth. Moral authority can be transformative, but it also makes leaders targets. His legacy still shapes civil rights movements and protest strategy worldwide. Today also marks the birth of Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1882. FDR would go on to lead the United States through the Great Depression and World War II, redefining the relationship between government and everyday life. Social security, financial regulation, and modern labor protection still form the backbone of the American state. Whether praised or criticized, the idea of government as a stabilizing force in times of crisis is part of his lasting imprint. In 1972, Bloody Sunday unfolded in Derry, Northern Ireland, when British soldiers killed 13 unarmed civil rights marchers. The event became a defining escalation point in the Troubles. Instead of restoring order, it radicalized a generation and deepened distrust between communities and the state. It remains a case study in how state violence, even when framed as security, can harden conflict and prolong it. The Tet Offensive began on this day in 1968 during the Vietnam War. Militarily, it was costly for North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces. Politically, it was seismic. It shattered the perception that the war was close to being won and marked a major turning point in American public opinion. It's a classic reminder that wars are often shaped as much by narrative and perception as by casualty counts and territory. On a lighter cultural note, today is the birthday of Christian Bale, born in 1974, an actor famous for some of the most extreme physical transformations in film history, from The Machinist to Batman. He's become a symbol of total commitment, for better or worse, in modern Hollywood. It's also the birthday of Phil Collins, born in 1951. Drummer, frontman, and soundtrack king, his music quietly soundtracked decades of pop culture, from In the Air Tonight to Disney's Tarzan. One of those artists people don't always realize how deeply they've absorbed. And to end on a fun historical note, in 1863, James Plimpton patented an early version of the modern roller skate, helping launch roller rinks, roller derby, and an entire subculture. A reminder that even small mechanical ideas can create whole social worlds. Today was a reminder that whether we're talking about peptides, politics, or personal loss, the same rule applies. Good mechanisms don't automatically mean good outcomes. Real progress, in medicine, in policy, and in healing, comes from evidence, integration, and humility, not hype, pressure, or false closure. And in a world that constantly demands instant answers, maybe the most radical thing we can do is give ourselves permission to sit with uncertainty, carry what matters, and move forward thoughtfully. This is Dr. Robinson for the Brief Wake Up. Stay calm, kind, and curious. I'll catch up with you next time.